Before we start, a quick note about what this channel is and what it isn't. This isn't a recap channel, and it's not a highlight reel. We're here for the parts of Panem that happen after the cameras turn away, the systems behind the games, the contracts hidden inside victory, the lives that keep unfolding long after the anthem ends. Each video on this channel is built to slow things down, to follow the logic the capital relies on, the details it hopes you won't connect, and the people who live with the consequences year after year. If that's the kind of Hunger Games analysis you're looking for, you're in the right place. Subscribing just means you'll keep a seat here when we move on to the next story. Now, let's start where Panem always wants you to stop paying attention. You remember the pearl, that tiny, perfect white sphere Peter presses into Katniss's hand in Catching Fire. The cameras zoom in. The music swells. Every capital viewer is supposed to sigh and think, this is what hope looks like. Or maybe you think of the locket, the one with Prim and Gale's photos dangling between them as Peter begs her to survive. Those objects feel personal. But here's the real question. Whose romance are those moments actually serving? At face value, the star-crossed lovers from District 12 Inches are Panem's favorite couple. The bakery boy who loved the girl on fire since the rain-soaked bread. The coal miner's daughter who finally lets herself feel something back. It's the most iconic relationship the game's ever produced. Songs, bets, fan art, sponsor campaigns all orbit that one story. The capital doesn't just broadcast that, it packages it. So was any of it real, or was it always a capital product? You think back to the first games before Peter's on-air confession with Caesar Flickerman. Tributes were brutal, tragic, heroic sometimes, but they weren't a ship. There was no rule that said romance had to be part of the arena. So why the change? Why does a brutal state-sanctioned child murder show suddenly pivot to selling you a tender love story? That clash isn't a glitch in the system. It's the system working exactly as designed. Because the real question is not, did Katniss love Peter? The real question is who decided this was a love story in the first place? And why did the entire nation have to believe it? Peter's confession doesn't just surprise Katniss. It instantly brands them for the audience. Caesar laughs, the crowd gasps, and within minutes, the games have a new genre, Battle Royale rom-com. That part matters because the second the capital names it, the arena bends around it. Seneca Crane changes the rules mid-games so two victors from the same district can win. Sponsors send medicine when they kiss. The cameras linger on the cave scenes and cut away from Katniss's political rage, turning survival tactics into couple goals. A kiss becomes oxygen. A staged confession becomes food. Any victor will tell you the games don't end when you win. For Katniss and Peter, the relationship doesn't end when the arena shuts down either, because the capital has already promised its citizens a fairy tale. If the lovers break up, the story breaks, and that's dangerous. There is a lot to uncover here about why Snow would rather sell a romance than let a rebellion narrative take root. So in this video, we're going to cover how producers, rule changes, sponsors, stylists, Caesar, and even Snow himself manufactured this relationship beat by beat. This is where we talk about what that does to Katniss, to Peter, and to every district forced to watch. If the greatest love story in Panem was written in a control room, what does that make the pearl in her hand? And what does that make their choice with the Nightlock? Why a fake love story can kill you or save you? Nightlock is the perfect symbol because it turns a love story into a weapon. 2 berries, 2 tributes. One decision that forces the capital to answer a question it's been dodging for 74 years. What happens when the story stops obeying the script? To see why that's so dangerous, you have to go back to the original games. Back then, right after the dark days, the arena isn't a soap opera. It's a public execution stretched over weeks. No sponsors, no glossy interviews, just punishment and terror broadcast to every district as a reminder, this is what happens if you rebel. So why by the 74th games are we watching slow-motion kisses and getting reaction shots of capital citizens crying into their cocktails? Because the games evolve from pure fear into a product that needs ratings. At face value, the Hunger Games are about retribution. But here's the real question. Why invest in stylists, elaborate arenas, and Caesar Flickerman's entire talk show persona if the only goal is punishment? The reason is that terror alone burns out. Spectacle can run forever. You don't just watch a slaughter, you pick favorites, you ship people, you buy into a relationship. For the tributes, that part matters because the relationship isn't a subplot. It's the algorithm that decides who lives. Peter's confession on Caesar's stage instantly reframes District 12's Girl on Fire as half of the star-crossed lovers. Suddenly, every kiss has a price tag. A kiss in the cave, medicine drops from the sky. Shared food, broth appears. The capital literally rewards affection with calories and antibiotics. So why wouldn't you lean into the romance when the alternative is infection and starvation? Then Seneca changes the rules. Out of nowhere, he announces that 2 tributes from the same district can win. Why now? Why not any of the previous 73 years? Because once the romance angle takes off, the games have a new hook, and the control room can't afford to kill it too early. The rule change is not mercy, it's a ratings stunt that weaponizes hope. 2 victors mean twice the tears, twice the sponsorships, twice the promise that the games can be beautiful. But Snow isn't satisfied with beautiful. He needs believable. Why does he care if the love looks real? Why send threats over a handful of berries and not over the body count? Because if the districts ever suspect the love story is an act, they might also notice the games are an act. The entire system depends on people accepting the narrative they're given. And here's where we're going to cover the cruel twist. Victory doesn't end the games. It just moves you to a different arena. Katniss and Peter survive the mutts and the landmines only to wake up inside a permanent PR tour. The Nightlock stunt forces the capital to honor its own rule change, but the price is a lifetime contract. They are now the official star-crossed lovers of Panem. On the train home, in the Victor's Village, on the Victory Tour, every interaction is monitored for consistency. Every touch has to reassure the capital audience that this was romance, not rebellion. This is where we talk about the second arena: talk shows, interviews, photo ops. The stakes are still life and death, just slower. A wrong word can mean your family, a cold shoulder can mean your district. So when you see Katniss holding Peter's hand on camera, you're not just watching a couple, you're watching a hostage negotiation, broadcast in HD. The real question going forward is, how long can anyone survive in a relationship the Capitol owns. Our thesis: the Capitol's greatest rom-com, so when you see Katniss holding Peter's hand on camera, you're not just watching a couple, you're watching a hostage negotiation, broadcast in HD. The real twist is that the Capitol is both the kidnapper and the screenwriter. At face value, Panem thinks it's tuning into a miracle. Two kids from the same district thrown into the worst arena in history, somehow finding love in a hopeless place. But here's the real question. Is the Capitol documenting a romance, or did it build the romance first and then sell it back to the districts as hope? From the moment Peter confesses his crush on Caesar's stage, you can feel the machinery kick in. Caesar reacts exactly on cue, the audience gasps exactly on cue, and suddenly the star-crossed lovers from District 12 Inches are a brand. This is where we talk about control. The producers don't just broadcast that moment, they replay it, frame it, and cut around it so every other part of Katniss's identity becomes secondary to one thing: her relationship. Think about the rule change. Seneca Crane doesn't wake up one day and discover romance in his heart. He announces that two tributes from the same district can win only after the love story is already testing well with the Capitol audience. That part matters because it tells you the games are not a neutral arena. They're a show that can be rewritten mid-season if the ratings demand it. And once that rule shifts, the incentives shift with it. Sponsors send soup when they kiss, medicine when they cuddle in the cave. The Capitol literally monetizes affection. Perform intimacy, receive oxygen. Refuse, and you both die. Katniss and Peter are protagonists, sure, but they're also unpaid actors on a state-run set, where every genuine feeling is immediately questioned, tested, and priced. For the viewers, the promise is beautiful. Love conquers all. Maybe your district's tributes could be saved by a soulmate too. For Katniss and Peter, it's a trap with soft lighting. The more they lean into the story to survive, the harder it becomes to know which touches strategy and which is real. The psychological prison isn't just the fear of snow, it's the constant doubt in their own emotions. And here's where it gets even colder. The star-crossed lovers angle, that's a template, a narrative pattern the Capitol can pull off the shelf whenever the games start to feel too brutal or too boring. Tragedy season? Push the doomed romance? Low engagement? Add a mid-game twist that rewards couples. There is a lot to uncover here in terms of production decisions, editing choices, and a sponsorship economy that rewards whatever storyline Snow wants. Amplified. So when Snow talks about a little hope being useful, this is the operational manual. The romance softens the executions, distracts from the children dying off screen, and gives every district something emotionally digestible to cling to. In the next section, we're going to cover how that same script slowly breaks down, and what happens when Katniss stops playing the role the Capitol wrote for her, what we're unpacking today, and the twist at the end. So where are we actually going with all of this? If the romance is a script, not a miracle, then we need to map out who's in the writer's room, what scenes they're crafting, and why the Capitol keeps doubling down on this relationship even when it starts to backfire. First, we're going to cover the machine itself. This is where we talk about the hosts, stylists, producers, and rule makers as the real showrunners of the games. Caesar Flickerman doesn't just ask questions, he frames Peter's confession as a swoony reveal. Cinna doesn't just put you in a dress, he turns you into the girl on fire who looks good on a capital billboard. Seneca Crane doesn't just enforce rules, he can literally rewrite them mid-game to reward a kiss. At face value, they're just doing their jobs. But here's the real question. What happens when your job is to turn two terrified teenagers into a national love story? From there, we'll move moment by moment through the romance the Capitol sells you. Peter's on-air confession, the cave sequence, the two-victor rule change, the nightlock bluff. Each of these isn't just a cute beat in a relationship. It's a move on a chessboard shaped by cameras and audiences. Why does a kiss earn you burn cream? Why does sharing soup become more valuable than tracking other tributes? There is a lot to uncover here about how sponsors, editing, and commentary teach Panem that affection equals survival, and why that part matters because it blurs the line between strategy and sincerity for both Katniss and Peter. Then we'll zoom out to the meta level and ask what Suzanne Collins is doing versus what the films decide to emphasize. The books linger on Katniss calculating every gesture, constantly asking whether Peter's feelings are real, while the movies smooth that into a more straightforward young adult romance. Why soften the manipulation? Why cut some of Katniss's coldest internal questions? This is where we talk about how adaptation choices can gently push you to ship the couple instead of interrogating the system that's profiting from their pain. And because Panem is bigger than one arena, we'll end by speculating outward. If this is the Capitol's favorite trick, where else have they tried to manufacture star-crossed lovers and failed? What other games might have had almost romances that didn't catch on? Or victors who refused to play along? Using hints from canon and the culture of each district, we'll imagine alternate pairings, PR disasters, and what those failed campaigns reveal about the limits of propaganda. Finally, we'll circle back to the core question, real versus fake. The twist we're building toward is that the Capitol's biggest mistake wasn't inventing a love story. It was underestimating what happens when millions of people, and the tributes themselves, start believing in it too hard. When survival performance turns into actual feeling, who's really in control? Stay with this, because the moment that answer flips is the moment the games quietly start to lose their power. Welcome to the arena behind the arena, and that's exactly where this channel lives, in that gap between what the Capitol thinks it's controlling and what's actually slipping through its fingers. If you're new here, welcome to our little corner of Victor's Village. This is where we don't just rewatch the games, we move in next door to the victors, walk their streets, and ask why Panem is built the way it is. We're going to cover lore, politics, and character psychology, but always as if you're standing in the district square or in a Capitol control room, not reading a textbook. At face value, you could watch Katniss and Peter's relationship as a tragic romance and stop there. But this is where we talk about the machinery underneath. Media systems, power structures, the way rebellion gets packaged and resold as entertainment. Why does Seneca Crane change the rules mid-games? Why does Caesar Flickerman frame Peter's confession as a swoon moment instead of a tactical bomb? Why does the Capitol reward a kiss with bread and medicine instead of, basic human rights? There is a lot to uncover here, and the focus on this channel is that hidden layer, not recap, dissection. We track how the Capitol uses interviews, sponsorships, and editing to turn two scared teenagers from District 12 into a national obsession. and what that does to their sense of self. That part matters because once you see the system behind one relationship, you start seeing it behind every promise of hope the capital makes. If you're someone who wants granular detail, the exact wording of Snow's threats, the layout of Victor's village, how mentoring locks victors into permanent service, this is your village. We'll keep coming back to mentoring, propaganda, and what post-war Panem might realistically do with all this trauma. So if you want to stay in that headspace to follow this whole arc, from the first games to rebuilding the districts, make sure you don't wander too far from the square. If you've been here before, you know we keep circling the same core tensions: hope versus fear, spectacle versus reality, survival versus performance. This episode connects straight back to those themes, but you don't need a watch order. You can drop in here and still get a full story about how one manufactured love plot starts to corrode the very games it was designed to save. So here's the real question as we head back in. What happens if we treat the rest of this video as a tour of the Capitol's writer's room? Imagine the producers pinning scenes of Katniss and Peter on a board, arguing over which kiss gets a close-up, which act of defiance gets cut, and which moment of mercy can be reframed as romance. From this point on, we're walking through that invisible arena behind the arena, where the relationship is engineered, tested on an entire nation, and sold back to the districts as the only way to survive. From massacre to must-see TV, how the games got a makeover. So how did we even get here, where a death match needs a love story to keep the ratings up? Because that's not how the game started. At all. Back then, the early post-war games were bare. No fire dresses, no Caesar Flickerman with teeth brighter than the arena lights. Just a field, some weapons, and a broadcast that was basically a live execution feed. The point wasn't entertainment, it was punishment. Every district tuned in because they were forced to, and the capital wanted them terrified, not entertained. But here's the real question. Terror works fast, so why doesn't the capital just keep doing that forever? The reason is that fear has a shelf life for the people in power. For citizens in the capital, year 230, year 40 of watch children die starts to blur together. Same format, same outcome, no suspense. The games risk becoming background noise, another channel you flip past while you eat your purple soup. And that part matters, because if the games become boring, they stop working as the central ritual that holds Panem together. If no one in the capital cares, if it's just static in the background, you lose that shared national event where everyone participates in the same cruelty at the same time. Apathy is dangerous for Snow in a different way. A bored ruling class starts asking why the system exists at all. So the solution is simple and incredibly dark. You don't change the violence, you change the genre. This is where we talk about the games shifting from punishment to programming. Tributes stop being anonymous bodies and start being characters. You get stylists, interviews, training scores. You get Caesar coaching tributes into sound bites. At face value, it's glitz. Underneath, its basic storytelling structure: introduce your cast, give them traits, let the audience pick favorites. We're going to cover how Snow's fingerprints are all over this. Mentors, for example, are a production tool as much as a reward. They carry lore from past seasons, they coach tributes into marketable personas, and they keep victors bound to the games forever. Betting and sponsorship do the same thing. Suddenly, the capital isn't just watching. They're playing along, placing wagers, sending gifts, feeling a personal relationship to who lives and who dies. Once you start thinking of the arena as a serialized show, romance becomes the inevitable upgrade. Violence is one genre. Violence plus a love triangle, that's a franchise. You can reset the story every year with new pairs, new near kisses, new betrayals. The star-crossed lovers angle with Katniss and Peter isn't a one-off miracle. It's the perfected version of a structure the capital has been leaning toward for decades. And Snow understands the promise hidden in that structure. If love can save you, if a relationship can literally change the rules of the games, then every district child grows up wondering not just will I die, but who would die for me? It's twisted, but it keeps them emotionally invested in the very system designed to kill them. The real twist comes when the story starts working too well and the capital can't tell where performance ends and rebellion begins. That's where we're headed next. Meet the showrunners, Caesar, stylists, and the invisible writer's room. The real twist comes when the story starts working too well and the capital can't tell where performance ends and rebellion begins. That's where we're headed next, because before Katniss and Peter ever step into the arena, the capital has already built the stage. This is where we talk about the showrunners. On paper, Caesar Flickerman is just a host. Sequins, blue hair, a mic, some tasteful crowd-pleasing laughter. But at face value is not how the games work. Caesar is the face of the narrative engine, the person who tells every district exactly how to feel about each tribute. When he leans forward and gets misty-eyed, you're told, this one is tragic. When he cracks a joke, you're told, this one is entertainment. Watch how the interviews are structured. 1 minute of glide-on charm, a question about home, a rehearsed anecdote, then a sharp pivot into pain or promise. Here's the real question. Why that format every single year? Because it produces clean sound bites, backstories that can be replayed all week, little emotional hooks the capital can meme into running jokes or national heartbreak. Rue as the sweet little sister, Cato as the ruthless career, Katniss as the reluctant rebel who doesn't know how to make people like her. We're going to cover the clothes too, because the stylists aren't just doing fashion, they're doing branding. Cinna and Portia don't put Katniss and Peter in coordinated fire for fun. They lock them into a shared visual language. The girl on fire and the boy who stands beside her, literally glowing in the same palette. That part matters because every shot of them together tells the audience, these two are a set, a relationship before they've even spoken on stage, and behind Caesar's smile and Cinna's gold eyeliner, there is a lot to uncover here in the invisible writer's room. The unseen producers choose camera angles, decide which district gets a lingering close-up, and which one is rushed off stage. They hand Caesar his cards. They know which tributes have chemistry, which ones have sob stories, which ones might sell as enemies or as lovers. When a tribute gets more airtime, the capital is quietly answering a question for you. Whose survival should you care about? So by the time Peter walks out in matching flames and drops, I've had a crush on you forever, that sentence doesn't land in a vacuum. It lands in a country that has already seen the coordinated costumes, the shy girl who can't play to the crowd, the boy who can. The infrastructure is ready. The cameras cut to Katniss, the music swells, the audience screams on cue, and somewhere far from the stage, President Snow is watching, asking himself a different question. Did they just hand him a perfect distraction, or the spark of something much more dangerous? Because when the Capitol falls in love with its own script, that's when the games start to slip out of their control. Peter's confession, spontaneous honesty, or scripted beat. So when Peter drops the bomb on Caesar's couch, you have to ask yourself, did we just witness a boy blurting out a crush, or the clean first beat of a perfectly timed story arc? We remember the moment. Caesar is doing his usual softball routine, warming the audience up, getting you to see this District 12 baker's son as harmless, charming, safe. Then he pushes that one personal question. Is there a special girl back home? Peter hesitates, smiles, and says the line that freezes Katniss in place. He's in love with her, and has been for years. The crowd gasps. Caesar staggers back in mock shock. The camera cuts to Katniss, stunned under all that glitter and flame. At face value, it feels spontaneous, a confession that just slipped out under the heat of the lights. But watch what happens in the same breath. Caesar doesn't move on. He leans in, he repeats it, frames it, feeds it back to the audience as a revelation. Star-crossed lovers from District 12. That part matters because you're seeing the Capitol's machine grab hold of a single sentence and spin it into a narrative in real time. So here's the real question. Is Peter improvising, or is this something he and Haymitch cooked up on the train? We know Haymitch is already searching for an angle, some reason for the Capitol to care about two kids from a coal district. A romance offers instant contrast, brutal games, tender relationship, hope and tragedy in one neat package. It's exactly the sort of thing a drunk genius mentor would recognize as sponsor bait. But there is a lot to uncover here, because the text also leaves room for it to be real. Peter's feelings predate the games, the bread in the rain, the years of watching Katniss from a distance. If he's telling the truth, then the strategy isn't inventing a relationship out of nowhere. It's weaponizing something that already hurts. This is where we talk about framing. Caesar's delighted reaction, the way the cameras linger on Katniss's shock instead of Peter's vulnerability, the cutaways to an audience squealing and swooning. Every choice tells the Capitol what to feel. You're not supposed to be thinking about 23 deaths anymore. You're supposed to be wondering, will the girl return his feelings before the games tear them apart? And the consequences are immediate. Sponsors notice, suddenly, the odds for District 12 don't just reflect combat potential, they reflect romantic potential. The promise of a tragic love story sells better than another forgettable slaughter. Katniss, who never agreed to any of this, is shoved into a role on live television. Her reactions, or lack of them, become public property. So even if Peter's confession is honest, does that honesty still matter when the entire world only experiences it through the Capitol's carefully edited broadcast? Or does the edit become the truth everyone has to live inside, whether they chose it or not? Editing as a weapon, what the Capitol shows and hides. So when the edit becomes the truth, we have to ask, whose truth is it? Because the arena isn't just a battlefield, it's a set. Every rock, every tree, every cave you crawl into. Already mapped, already wired. The Capitol has cameras in hollow logs, in the cornucopia, even in the branches where Rue hides. They can pull a sweeping aerial of a bloodbath, then cut straight to a tight close-up of Katniss brushing Peter's hair off his forehead. Same arena, same hour of the games. Completely different story. And here's the real question. Out of thousands of hours of footage, why do Capitol living rooms mostly see the kisses, the tears, the star-crossed lovers holding hands by the fire? At face value, it looks romantic. Two tributes clinging to each other in a hostile world. But there is a lot to uncover here, because every second you see has already been chosen over something else you don't. This is where we talk about the cave. In the book, that cave is a strategy bunker inside Katniss's head. She's calculating how much affection gets a sponsor gift, how much of this is real. None of that internal monologue ever hits the broadcast. What does hit? Soft lighting, close-ups of entwined fingers, lingering shots on the first kiss, replayed and reframed until it plays as pure devotion instead of survival math. Think about how different that feels. You, as a viewer in the district, never hear her thinking, "I must have been wrong about Peter." You only see the way the camera hangs on her face after he says he's loved her since the bread. The producers literally crop out her suspicion and amplify his sincerity. That part matters because it turns a lopsided, strategic relationship into a balanced romance the audience can root for. And sponsors, they only see the broadcast. Their parachutes are effectively votes cast on an edit. When Katniss kisses Peter and immediately gets that life-saving broth, the message is clear. Affection equals reward. The Capitol decides which behaviors produce gifts by deciding which behaviors get screen time. Hug your ally after a kill? That's a segment. Share a quiet conversation about district oppression? Maybe that never airs. Pattern interrupt. How many stories did we never even know existed? If the star-crossed lovers template works, what happens to tributes whose bonds don't fit it? Friendships that are too supportive, alliances that question the games, queer relationships that challenge the Capitol's preferred fantasy of young, straight, tragic love. Those are risks. Why feed hope in the wrong direction when you can sell a safer dream? So when we talk about Katniss and Peter's romance, we're really talking about an edit suite deciding which version of them is allowed to exist. And the next move the Capitol makes, changing the rules mid-games for a potential double victor, only locks that story in further. Rule changes for ratings. When love rewrites the game, so when the Capitol suddenly says, 2 tributes from the same district can win, you're not hearing mercy, you're hearing a new season pitch. Notice the timing. They don't roll this rule out at the reaping, or even when the games begin. It drops only after Peter's confession, after the star-crossed lovers label has been burned into every viewer, after Katniss's desperate kisses in the arena start trending in sponsor gifts. At face value, it sounds generous, but here's the real question. Why wait until the audience is already in a frenzy over their relationship? Because this is a showrunner decision. Seneca Crane isn't just a head game maker, he's a head writer doing a mid-season rewrite. Up to that point, the arc is simple. Will Katniss survive as the lone underdog from a poor district? Once the love story lands, that arc suddenly looks flat. So he hits the button and creates a brand new act. Now the question becomes, can they find each other? Can they both make it out? You've turned a likely solo victory into a race toward a double ending. That part matters because the Capitol doesn't change rules for ethics. It changes rules for engagement. Listen to the language of the announcement. It's framed as a twist, a surprise, almost fan service. The trumpets, the reverb on Seneca's voice, the way the camera cuts to Katniss processing what this means for Peter. Life and death lore is being delivered with the same tone as a reality show special episode. We're going to cover this again when we talk about the final rule reversal. But here you can already see the pattern. Rules become beats, morality becomes content. So where is Snow in all this? Crucially, he doesn't shut it down. He's watching the numbers. This is where we talk about oversight as ratings management. As long as the story sells, tragic, hetero, photogenic devotion from a backwater district, Snow lets Seneca play. His concern isn't the two-victor rule on paper, it's whether the love story stays believable and, more importantly, controllable. The moment it stops being a distraction and starts smelling like defiance, that's when he steps in. And for everyone watching, the lesson is brutal. The rule change teaches tributes and districts something they were never supposed to realize. If you hit the right narrative vein, the arena itself will bend. Romance gets you bread, medicine, and now, theoretically, a second life. Why wouldn't the next tribute wonder, what story does the Capitol want from me? Why wouldn't future victors treat relationships as strategy, not fate? There is a lot to uncover here, because once you understand that the games can be rewritten for a good storyline, you have to ask, what happens when the storyline the Capitol has chosen starts to go off script? Kisses for medicine, how sponsors train tributes to perform love. So when the storyline starts to go off script, what does the Capitol do? They pull out their wallet. This is where we talk about the sponsor economy. At face value, it looks generous. Wealthy citizens sending gifts, tiny silver parachutes drifting down with food, burn cream, medicine, hope in a package. But here's the real question. Why are those gifts tied to how entertained and emotionally invested the audience feels instead of how much danger the tributes are actually in? You're not just surviving the arena. You're auditioning for funding. Sponsors are the Capitol's crowd control mechanism. They turn passive viewers into paying participants. And that part matters because it links your heartbeat in the arena to their emotional satisfaction on the couch. If a tribute is funny, dramatic, tragic, or romantic, they earn more votes in the form of parachutes. Boring tributes starve. The games become a marketplace where personality and performance are worth more than skill. The cave sequence is the clearest proof. Peter is dying. Infection, fever, time running out. Katniss has already been brave, already been competent, already risked her life. No medicine, nothing. Then she leans into the star-crossed lover's angle, kisses Peter for the cameras, tells him stories, plays up the relationship. Suddenly, the parachutes start coming. Food for the cute couple. And when the medicine finally appears, it's only after the Capitol escalates the stakes with that feast announcement and Haymitch makes it crystal clear, you want this life-saving vial, you sell the romance harder. We're going to cover the rule change and feast in more detail later, but here you can already see the pattern. Affection equals supplies, distance equals silence. Haymitch's notes turn this into explicit direction. You call that a kiss? In the film, the timing of every parachute in the book, each one is basically a line from a director's script. More of that. Less of this. He's reading the sponsor feedback and translating it into behavioral cues for Katniss. Don't just care about Peter. Perform caring about Peter in the way the Capitol finds most shippable. Over time, that becomes Pavlovian conditioning. You show affection, you get bread. You cuddle, you get broth. You risk your life for your boyfriend, you get medicine. Your nervous system doesn't care that it started as strategy. It only knows that certain behaviors lead to warmth, full stomachs, and survival. Romance and staying alive become neurologically braided together. So here's the real question. If every time you act in love, you're rewarded, at what point does your brain stop sorting real from performance? If you're from a district where hunger is constant, how long before a kiss that earns you soup feels safer, truer than any quiet feeling you had back home? And once the Capitol has trained you to equate affection with oxygen, what happens when they decide to cut the supply? Katniss versus the script. Survival tactic or emotional truth. So when the Capitol turns off the oxygen of affection, what's left for Katniss to breathe? This is where we talk about the script she's supposed to follow, and the feelings that refuse to stay on cue. In the books, you live inside her head. She tells you, flat out, that the star-crossed lovers angle is a strategy. Kissing Peter is a move on the board, not a diary entry. At face value, it sounds simple. She's performing. But here's the real question. If you only watch the films, where you almost never hear that internal commentary, what do you see? You see the kisses, the tears. The cave, you see the performance without the label performance. And that part matters because it changes how you judge her relationship to the script. Katniss herself can't keep that relationship straight. One moment, Peter is an ally, a district partner who understands the games. Next, he's a liability, announcing his crush on live television and painting a target on her back. Then he's a friend, someone who shares burnt bread memories and rooftop conversations about refusing to be a piece in their games. Then suddenly he's a crush, when a kiss in the arena sends a sponsor gift and her stomach actually flips. And over all of that, he's a co-actor, the only other person who knows the lines they're supposed to sell. The Capitol, though, wants one answer. Is he your true love or not? Producers, Caesar Flickerman, even Haymitch keep pushing her to pick a single role and stay in it, because consistency is easier to broadcast. We're going to cover the propaganda side more later, but you can already feel the pressure. Every time she hesitates, someone reminds her that the audience needs clarity. The games reward certainty. Her brain, meanwhile, is pure static. And then there are the moments that are not static at all. When Peter is bleeding out in the arena, she isn't thinking about camera angles. She's panicking. When he volunteers to die so she can live, she's furious, not because it ruins the show, but because it risks losing him. Her protectiveness in the quarter quell, her terror when he's captured, those spikes of emotion don't fit neatly into "it's all fake." There is a lot to uncover here, because genuine anger and fear don't care whether the mic is on. But the mic is always on. That's the psychological damage. Every real feeling she has is immediately monetized, edited, and aired back at her as content. How do you trust your own heart when the Capitol keeps turning it into a highlight reel? When a kiss brings medicine? When a confession brings bread? When your grief trends in the Capitol, your nervous system learns that emotions are tools, not truths. So here's the real question. If you're forced to perform love 24/7, does that erase any real love that might grow, or just make it impossible to prove to the districts, to Peter, and most of all to yourself? And if you can't prove it, what happens when someone else starts writing your love story for you? Peter, the true believer, when the script matches the heart. So if Katniss is performing love to stay alive, what do you do with someone who isn't performing at all? This is where we talk about Peter, because for him, the cameras don't invent a crush to sell a narrative. They stumble onto a story that's already been running in his head since the burnt bread in the rain. Back then, before the games, before the Capitol even knew his name, he's a boy in a warm bakery looking out at a starving girl in the mud. He takes a beating so she can have a loaf. No audience, no sponsors, just a private, stubborn promise. She's worth hurting for. At face value, that sounds romantic. But here's the real question. What happens when a feeling that pure gets dragged under studio lights? On camera, Peter reads as effortless television. He's vulnerable in the interviews. He jokes with Caesar. He owns his fear instead of posturing. You can feel why Capitol viewers latch onto him. In a world of career tributes flexing and threatening, he's the one boy who looks straight into the lens and says, "I'm in love with the girl from my district." No irony, no armor. For an audience trained by the games to cheer blood, he offers something they haven't been allowed to root for in years. A genuinely good victor candidate. And that part matters because the more honest he is, the easier it is to cut him into a story. The producers don't have to script Peter's devotion. They just have to frame it. Every worried glance at Katniss becomes a reaction shot. Every moment of jealousy in Catching Fire, every flicker when Gale's name comes up, gets repackaged as a love triangle instead of what it really is. A traumatized boy trying to understand his relationship in a world where your girlfriend's kiss might be a survival tactic. There is a lot to uncover here. The Capitol turns his sincerity into content. His pain when he thinks Katniss doesn't truly love him, that's a rating spike. His proposal on the Victory Tour, pushed by Snow as damage control, is both a cage and a cliffhanger. We're going to cover how sponsors literally send medicine and bread when the romance hits the right beats, teaching him that the only safe way to feel is in a form the audience will pay for. Then the pattern breaks. Hijacking takes everything the cameras adored about him and flips it. The same neural pathways that once lit up at Katniss's face are chemically rewired to trigger terror and hatred. The Capitol doesn't just spin his story, it reaches into his brain and edits the source footage. If you ever wondered how little they respect the line between inner life and public narrative, this is your answer. So here's the real question. Is Peter's love more real because it existed before the games? Or does the Capitol's exploitation stain it anyway? If every memory can be weaponized, does authenticity still protect you, or just give the story more to burn when the rewrites begin? Convince me, or else. Authenticity doesn't save them. It just raises the stakes of the lie, because then you get to that morning in District 12 when President Snow is suddenly in Katniss's Victor's Village kitchen, smelling of blood and roses. At face value, it's a congratulations visit. In reality, this is where we talk about national security being decided over a plate of breakfast rolls. He doesn't yell. He doesn't need to. He just stands there, a predator in white, and tells her exactly what the Capitol saw in the arena: two desperate teenagers in love, or two tributes daring to outwit the games. And here's the real question. Which version wins determines whether Panem stays quiet or catches fire. Snow spells it out. Those berries? They're either a proposal or a provocation. If the districts decide it was defiance, then the games stop being a promise of order and start looking like a stage for rebellion. Suddenly, every tribute has a new question in their head. If she broke the rules and lived, why can't I? So his demand is brutally simple. On the victory tour, she must convince everyone, capital and districts, that the only reason she lifted those berries was because she couldn't bear to live without Peter. Overwhelming romantic desperation, not political intent. Not strategy, not solidarity. Just a girl, a boy, and a toxic fruit bowl. We're going to cover the mechanics of that tour later, but notice what he's doing here. Snow is treating the love story as infrastructure. If people buy the romance, the games keep their legitimacy. If they see resistance, the whole system looks rigged and vulnerable. There is a lot to uncover here about how fragile that relationship between spectacle and control really is. That part matters because he's not asking her for a better performance. He's issuing a hostage situation with good manners. He mentions Gale. He mentions District 12. He makes it clear that if she fails to sell the narrative, the response won't be bad ratings. It will be executions, mass punishments, a mining town turned into an example. So suddenly the star-crossed lovers aren't just a PR angle, they're a containment strategy. The Capitol is literally trying to smother rebellion with a wedding announcement. And here's the paradox at the center of it. Snow needs the love story to feel organic, irresistible, something that gives the audience hope that the games can still produce beauty. But he can only maintain it with the bluntest tools he has: surveillance, threats, and the credible promise of violence. Enforced at gunpoint, how long can that hold before the cracks in the script start showing on camera? The Nightlock ultimatum, when the product breaks the show, and then the script finally breaks. On paper, the Capitol still has control. Seneca revokes the rule change, the trumpets blare, and the announcer snaps the story back to standard format. One victor, one story, order restored. But here's the real question. What happens when the product you've spent the whole game selling suddenly refuses to perform on cue? This is where we talk about the Nightlock. Katniss and Peter are standing in a blood-soaked, empty arena that was supposed to end in a lover's reunion. Instead, the voice of the Capitol casually tells them, "Actually, never mind, only one of you gets to live." At face value, that's just the original rule. But there is a lot to uncover here, because by this point the entire country has been trained to expect the fairy tale payoff. The star-crossed lovers branding isn't subtext anymore, it's the headline. So Katniss does something the showrunners didn't storyboard. She offers Peter the berries. Mutual suicide. No Victor. No wedding tour. No Victor's village home for the camera crews to parade through. Just two dead kids and a broken promise. Look at the binary she forces. If they both die, the Capitol gets structural integrity. The games remain ruthless. Rules are absolute. And no one ever again expects mercy. But the cost is narrative collapse. You can't spend hours of broadcast time framing these two as a once-in-a-generation love story and then shrug when they die together because of your own bait and switch. Every district audience would see it for what it is: arbitrary cruelty dressed up as entertainment. The other option, let them both win. That part matters because it means admitting in real time that the rules of the games are negotiable if the story demands it. The Capitol chooses that. They choose ratings, romance, and the illusion of hope over the cold consistency their whole system supposedly rests on. In that instant, the love story has more value than the rulebook, and everyone sees it. In the districts, people aren't just swooning over a romantic gesture. They watch two tributes weaponize the very narrative the Capitol wrote for them. The berries are a dare. You wanted star-crossed lovers? Fine. Here's your tragic ending. When the announcer panics and reverses again, stop, stop. Both of you can be victors. The mask slips. The relationship between power and story is exposed. The games aren't sacred, they're improv. So why does that matter going forward? Because once a regime proves it will bend reality to protect its favorite story, it accidentally tells every viewer that stories are where its power is softest. If a fake romance can force the Capitol's hand, what could a real symbol of defiance do? Here's the question that hangs over every screen in Panem now. If two kids with a handful of berries can glitch the games, what happens when that same story starts teaching the districts a different kind of hope? Reality TV, ship wars, and state propaganda. Why this feels familiar. So when those berries turn into a different kind of hope, you feel this déjà vu, right? Because you've seen this story before, not just in Panem. On your own screen, think about the games as the Capitol's ultimate reality show. You have producers in shiny suits, a live audience, confessionals in the form of interviews, and a host whose entire job is to squeeze a storyline out of terrified teenagers. Caesar Flickerman isn't just a presenter, he's the showrunner in plain sight, nudging Peter into confessing his crush, steering Katniss into the star-crossed lover's frame before she even enters the arena. On modern reality TV, producers push contestants towards showmances because romance is easy to sell. They isolate people, feed them lines, reward the couples with more screen time. The Capitol does the same thing with rule changes, cameras, and gifts. Seneca Crane literally edits the rules mid-game so two tributes from the same district can win together. That isn't justice. That's a ratings grab. Here's the real question. When affection earns you food, medicine, and sponsor gifts, is it still a relationship or is it performance under duress? Every kiss between Katniss and Peter is cut, replayed, and packaged. Sponsors send soup when they cuddle. The message is clear: be in love or be in danger. And we know this pattern. In our world, studios and PR teams quietly arrange celebrity couples, or at least exaggerate them. A co-star spotted holding hands. A sudden engagement right before a movie release. At face value, it looks spontaneous and romantic. Behind the scenes, there is a calendar, a contract, and a marketing plan. That part matters because it shows you why the Capitol's strategy feels so familiar. They're basically running a permanent publicity tour with higher stakes. In fandoms, people pick favorite pairings, argue over who belongs with who, and track every glance as evidence. It's fun, it's emotional, and it builds community. The Capitol weaponizes that exact instinct. They turn Peter and Katniss into a ship Then funnel the district's genuine investment into a safe outlet. Argue about are they real? All you want. As long as you're debating that, you're not organizing rebellion. Pattern interrupt for a second. How many hours have you spent caring about fictional or celebrity couples compared to learning how your own media is funded or censored? That's the capital's dream statistic. Authoritarian regimes do this too. State-controlled media will spotlight ideal marriages, loyal first couples, or picture-perfect families to project stability. You're not just seeing power, you're seeing power humanized and domesticated. If the leader kisses a baby or laughs with their spouse on camera, the system feels softer, less threatening. Snow does the same thing when he parades victors' weddings and pregnancies as proof that the games produce happy endings. So we're going to cover one more step. Who benefits when you accept these curated love stories without questions? Because once you start asking that in Panem, you might start asking it at home too. And that's when a romance stops being a distraction and starts becoming a threat. The meta question the capital answers wrong. So when you zoom out from the wedding specials and baby announcements, here's the real question. If the capital wants total control, why allow any love story on screen at all? Why not keep the games brutally clean? No interviews, no backstories, no messy relationships, just names, blood, and fear. Because that version of Panem is stable and dead boring. At face value, a pure terror broadcast sounds efficient. You pull 2 random kids from each district, you throw them in an arena, you make everyone watch. And the lesson is simple. The capital can kill you whenever it wants. No need for Caesar Flickerman, no need for a star-crossed lovers package cut together in some control room. So why open the door to empathy? Why let viewers fall in love with tributes who are about to die? Why encourage any relationship between the audience and the oppressed? There is a lot to uncover here, because that choice looks irrational until you remember the capital isn't just managing fear, it's managing attention. A population that's only terrified eventually goes numb. You keep showing them anonymous kids dying, and over time, it all blurs. The games become background noise. People go through the motions because they have to, not because they care. And a checked-out audience is harder to steer. They're not invested in the narratives. They're just enduring the punishment. Snow doesn't want endurance. He wants engagement. This is where we talk about boredom as a political problem. The capital needs people in the districts and in the capital proper to tune in, to gossip, to pick favorites. When Seneca Crane changes the rules mid-games to allow 2 victors from the same district, he isn't just being generous. He's juicing the ratings. Suddenly, you're not just watching a massacre, you're watching whether a promise between 2 kids from 12 can survive an arena. Love, framed correctly, is the perfect depoliticizer. If you're crying over whether Katniss will kiss Peter in that cave, you're not asking why children are in an arena in the first place. If sponsors send parachutes every time there's a romantic gesture, they teach you that affection equals survival, not solidarity. That part matters because it turns rebellion fuel into shippable content. And notice how carefully the capital trims the edges. They highlight the hand-holding, not the moments where Katniss questions the games. They package Peter's on-air confession as a swoon-worthy twist, not as a critique of the system that forced him there. The love is real enough to hook you, but not free enough to threaten the narrative. So why allow love at all? Because hope, when narrowed to maybe these two will make it, is safer than rage. Snow believes you can weaponize that hope, keep it small, keep it romantic, keep it personal, without losing control. In the next section, we're going to cover what happens when that calculation fails and when hope stops fitting inside a love story and starts spilling into open defiance. Hope, fear, and the Snow-Seneca theory of television. Snow is very clear about one thing. Fear on its own is sloppy. This is where we talk about that balcony scene with Seneca Crane because it's basically the mission statement for the entire franchise. Snow looks out over his perfect rose garden and says, almost casually, that fear isn't enough. Hope. It is the only thing stronger than fear. A little hope is effective. A lot of hope is dangerous. That part matters because it tells you exactly why the Capitol lets a love story exist in the arena at all. At face value, the Hunger Games already do the fear part. 24 children in an arena, yearly reaping the constant threat that your district is next. Public floggings, executions, the peacekeepers' guns. So why not just lean into that? Why bother with the show, the interviews, the gowns, the Caesar Flickerman banter? Here's the real question. Why does Snow insist on mixing hope into a system that's already terrifying? Because pure terror burns out. People either shut down or snap. The games of spectacle do something more precise. They wrap fear in entertainment, aspiration, and this weird sense of relationship. You don't just watch kids die, you watch your tribute, your district's potential victor, your favorite interview. You pick sides, you root, you send sponsors. Public hangings create only fear. The games create fear you keep tuning in for. Katniss and Peter's romance is the perfect delivery system for that little hope. The Capitol sells you the promise that maybe, if fate smiles, two people can find love and survive together. Not end the games, not change the districts, just survive. Statistically, it's absurd. Two tributes from the same district both making it to the end is already rare. Add genuine affection and mutual survival, and you're basically winning the cruelty lottery. But emotionally, it feels attainable enough that you keep watching instead of rioting. We're going to cover how the rule change exposes this. Seneca doesn't announce two victors from the same district until the star-crossed lovers narrative is already hot. The Capitol literally rewrites the rules of life and death to reward romance. Sponsors send soup for kisses, bread for whispered confessions. Every gift says the same thing. Affection equals survival. If you're in a district, what do you learn? Not overthrow Snow, you learn perform the right story, and maybe you live. And that's the genius and the flaw. The love story is supposed to be tiny, personal hope, a narrative pressure valve. It tells each viewer, don't burn down the system, just pray your child ends up special enough to be the next Peter or Katniss. But stories don't stay where you put them. In the Capitol, it's a romance. In the districts, the exact same footage can read as defiance, a girl from 12 forcing the Capitol to bend its own rules. So what happens when that little hope stops being comforting and starts looking contagious? When a kiss in a cave turns into a three-finger salute in a square? The answer to that question is where Snow's entire strategy begins to crack. Districts in love, how the story plays differently outside the capital. In the capital, that contagion is romantic. In the districts, it's radioactive. You're watching the exact same kiss, the same cave, the same handful of berries. But here's the real question. How does one story turn into a fashion moment for the capital and a whispered threat everywhere else? At face value, capital viewers are getting premium content. For them, Katniss and Peter are celebrities in a tragic drama, a must-watch relationship with great hair and better costumes. They debate whether the fire dress or the interview suit worked better, whether Peter's confession was rehearsed, whether the games will end in a wedding or a funeral. The games are a genre to them, romance with a high body count. But when you shift the camera to the districts, the emotional math changes. You're not seeing star-crossed lovers as a trope. You're seeing two terrified kids refusing to kill each other, even when the rules say only one victor is allowed. That part matters because every district family has done that calculation. If my child went in with someone they cared about, would they choose the capital's rules or each other? The berries answer that question in a way Snow never intended. This is where we talk about the victory tour, because it's the first time those readings collide in the same physical space. The capital wants a victory lap for its favorite couple, hand-holding on command, scripted kisses, rehearsed speeches about gratitude and the hope the games provide. But watch how the district crowds react. In Rue's district, the old man's whistle and salute are not about how cute the couple is. They're about the fact that these two stood on the edge of mutual suicide rather than play along. You can feel the dissonance. Some people in the crowd tear up at the story and seem to believe it. Others are stone-faced, measuring every gesture, trying to decide, is she acting or is this real? There is a lot to uncover here because that skepticism is its own form of media literacy. They know the capital edits. They know Caesar Flickerman spins. So when the lovers cling to each other, some viewers don't see romance. They see fear of the cameras, fear of Snow, and a desperate attempt to protect their families. And then there are the rumors. Officially, the berries are framed as a silly, impulsive act of love that the merciful capital forgave. Unofficially, the story mutates. In the seam, in the hob, in a textile mill in 8, people are retelling it as a folk tale. The girl who forced the games to change, the boy who chose to die with her rather than kill her. Stories move faster than peacekeepers, faster than propaganda. So why does this scare Snow so much? Because the capital assumes everyone will swallow the romance framing, that all districts will treat the games the way capital citizens do, as a show with pretty winners and tragic losers. But the districts are reading against the grain. They're seeing a crack in the armor, proof that the rules can bend if someone pushes hard enough. And once you start watching the broadcasts that way, you don't stop at one love story. You start asking what else is being edited, who else is pretending, and how far the capital will go to keep that promise of hope from turning into open rebellion. We're going to cover what happens when Snow tries to fix that problem the only way he knows how, by tightening the script, raising the stakes, and turning the love story itself into a weapon. The love triangle upgrade, Gale, Peter, and the capital's favorite trope. So when Snow tightens the script, what does he actually do? He doesn't just double down on the love story. He upgrades it to the capital's favorite genre, the love triangle. At face value, it's simple. You have Katniss in the center, pulled between Gale, her best friend and hunting partner from District 12, and Peter, her arena partner and public fiancé, the boy who turned the games into a romance on live TV. 3 people, one relationship web, overlapping promises and expectations that don't line up with reality. But here's the real question. Why is the Capitol so invested in turning that emotional mess into a primetime event? This is where we talk about the marketing. In Catching Fire, the Capitol doesn't just announce an engagement, it rolls out an entire campaign. You get the engagement photos, the victory tour kisses, the wedding dress segment with Caesar Flickerman where Katniss has to spin in front of an audience that's already picking out floral arrangements. The broadcast frames everything as Team Gale versus Team Peter, long before the fandom ever would. That part matters, because it tells you what story the Capitol wants you asking questions about. Instead of why are the districts on the edge of revolt, you're nudged toward who will she choose. Every public appearance is edited to feed that question. Gale's presence is minimized on Capitol screens, except when he can be slotted into the jealous boy back home role. Peter is given close-ups, soft lighting, and tragic eyes. Even the way Snow threatens Katniss's family turns into fuel. Her terror reads as romantic conflict to viewers who never see the whip marks on Gale's back. There is a lot to uncover here politically. By turning Katniss's decisions into romantic choices, the Capitol keeps the focus on her heart instead of her potential as a leader. Does she kiss Peter on the train? Does she run to Gale at the fence? Those moments become cliffhangers, not symptoms of a girl trying to keep everyone she loves alive under a regime that bombs districts for sport. It's reality TV logic weaponized by a dictatorship. And the cruelty is that Gale and Peter's real pain becomes raw material. Their jealousy, confusion, and hurt are mined for content. While whippings, bombings, and starvation stay off screen, you see Peter's face fall when Katniss hesitates. You don't see the Peacekeeper's boots in the mud of District 12. The games never ended. The arena just got bigger and better lit. So here's the pattern interrupt. What if the triangle itself is a cage? A narrative box that reduces trauma, poverty, and political awakening into a merchandisable storyline. Once you trap Katniss between Gale or Peter, you don't have to let her be something scarier, a symbol that refuses the script entirely. And that raises the next question. What happens when the Capitol tries to lock that cage from the inside of the arena itself? Book versus movie. How adaptation shifts the love story's blame. So when the Capitol tries to lock that cage from inside the arena, the books and the movies don't actually show you the same lock. They're telling the same events, sure, but they're not giving you the same relationship with the star-crossed lovers at all. On the page, you're trapped in Katniss's head. Every time she kisses Peter in that cave, you hear the calculation. She's thinking about sponsors, about Haymitch's notes, about what the Capitol wants to see. She literally calls the romance a strategy. She questions her own feelings, resents having to perform affection while he's bleeding out beside her. At face value, it's a love story. Inside her narration, it's a survival tactic she can't fully control. The film strips most of that inner monologue away. You don't hear the running commentary of, "This is for the cameras." You just see Jennifer Lawrence and Josh Hutcherson pressed together in the rain, trading soft lines and softer looks. The chemistry is right there on screen. So here's the real question. When you lose Katniss's explicit skepticism, how much easier is it to forget that this was engineered by the games in the first place? Take the cave scenes. In the book, Katniss is constantly checking the sky, listening for sponsor gifts, gauging whether each kiss has worked enough to earn medicine. There is a lot to uncover here about how transactional it feels. In the movie, the cameras linger on their faces. The sound drops out. The edit plays the moment straight, as if the universe has paused the games to let two teenagers fall in love. That part matters because it nudges you into the capital audience's seat. Same thing on the Catching Fire beach. Book Katniss is spiraling. Is this real? Is this hijacked by trauma? Is she using Peter? Is he using her? The kiss is tangled in guilt and dread. On screen, it's sunset, waves, confession. The framing screams sincerity. You're not asked to doubt, you're asked to swoon. And then the post-games interviews. On the page, Katniss is rehearsing lines with Haymitch, terrified of saying the wrong thing, aware that every gesture is a test of loyalty. In the films, we mostly see the polished version, the hand-holding, the smiles, Caesar Flickerman selling the romance as if it were the natural ending to a fairy tale. We're going to cover how those talk show moments are propaganda, but notice how the adaptation already softens the edges. So the books keep you aligned with Katniss's suspicion. The movies ease you toward the Capitol's fantasy. Intentionally or not, the films make the love story feel more real to us than it often feels to her. Which leads to an uncomfortable question. When we prioritize the kisses over the kids dying off screen, aren't we behaving exactly like Capitol citizens? And if that's true, what happens when you realize the real edit of this romance isn't just happening in universe, but in our own world too? Life after happily ever after, the PR prison of the victor couple. So if the Capitol edits can turn us into Capitol citizens, what does that mean for Katniss and Peter once the cameras are supposed to be off? The answer is simple and horrible. They never turn off. This is where we talk about the victory tour, which at face value sounds like a reward. You survived the games, you get a train, new clothes, parades in every district. But here's the real question. Why does the celebration look exactly like a press junket for a romance movie? Hand-holding on the platform, kissing on command under giant screens of your own faces, retelling the same cleaned-up story in District 1, 2, 3, all the way to 12. There is a lot to uncover here. On paper, Katniss and Peter are thanking the districts for their support. In practice, they are reciting a script the Capitol needs repeated. We were saved by love, the rule change was mercy, President Snow is generous, the games bring hope. They can't talk about the smell of blood, the children they watched die, or the fact that the rule change was revoked the second ratings were secure. Every time Katniss stands in a square, she's forced to pretend the arena was a fairy tale and not a slaughterhouse. And it doesn't stop when the train pulls away. Their relationship becomes a job description. They have to cohabitate in Victor's village, stage casual domestic moments, share a bed when they know cameras could be hidden anywhere. We're going to cover how Victor's village is designed for surveillance later, but that part matters because it turns their own home into a PR set. Joint interviews, joint appearances, a consistent narrative underwritten by the threat of punishment. Break character, and you're not just risking your own life, you're risking your mother, your sister, your entire district. Privately, Katniss is shattered. She's waking up from nightmares, dissociating at the sound of a cannon in her head, trying to untangle what was real feeling and what was strategy. Yet publicly, she has to project this blissful fiancé energy, the perfect, grateful victor who found true love in the arena. Have you ever tried to smile through a panic attack? That's her entire existence for months. Peter's position is even more twisted. He is genuinely in love, and he's also smart enough to know their relationship is being marketed back to the people who funded their parachutes. When Katniss pulls back, he's not just hurt. He's hurt on camera, in interviews, in those awkward train corridors where every clipped answer can be replayed in the Capitol that night. Is she acting? Is she rejecting him? Or is she just trying not to get them both killed? The relationship question becomes a survival question. So the real arena doesn't end when the mutts go quiet. It just shifts genres. The games become a long-term performance, a second arena where the weapons are smiles and kisses, and the cost is their sense of self. And the Capitol? They're still betting on the outcome, because if your victors can't tell where their real feelings end and the script begins, how can they ever organize a rebellion? Hijacked love. When the Capitol rewrites your feelings, so what happens when even your victors start to see through the script? When kisses stop working as weapons, the Capitol escalates. They don't just tweak the edit anymore. They go straight for the hard drive. This is where we talk about hijacking. At face value, hijacking sounds sci-fi, almost abstract. Tracker-jacker venom, advanced conditioning, some vague torture in a Capitol lab. But here's the real question. What are they actually trying to do to Peter? The answer is terrifyingly simple. They take the core of the games' favorite love story and flip the emotional wiring. Every memory where Katniss meant safety, warmth, or hope is chemically recoded so she means threat, betrayal, and terror. Back in the first arena, the Capitol nudged. A rule change here, a camera angle there, sponsors raining down soup whenever the star-crossed lovers kissed. They rewarded the performance of a relationship. Now, that's not enough. We're going to cover the jump from suggestion to overwrite. Tracker-jacker venom already causes hallucinations. The Capitol weaponizes that, pairing altered memories with pain, with repetition, with carefully chosen footage, until Peter's brain can't tell which version is true. The boy who once burned bread to keep her alive now remembers a mutt in human skin. That part matters because it shows the evolution of control. Early on, editing and sponsorships are about steering behavior. If you act this way, you live. By the time we get to hijacked Peter, the message has changed to, we will decide what you feel. We will decide what was real. The love story goes from being a survival strategy to being state property, something the Capitol can repossess and remodel at will. For Katniss, this is a new arena with no rules she understands. The one person who shared every horror of the games with her now looks at her and sees the monster under the bed. He's strapped down, thrashing, calling her a mutt, and she has to ask herself a question no victor should ever have to ask. Which version of us is real? The boy on the rooftop in the rain, or the boy in restraints who wants her dead? When the Capitol can't control the narrative externally, when districts are burning, when Mockingjay songs drown out Caesar Flickerman's interviews, they pivot inward. They seize the battlefield of Peter's mind. His memories become a new kind of arena, where the Capitol is still head game maker, splicing together past and present to tell the story they need. Katniss as predator, the Capitol as protector. So is this the endpoint of manufactured romance? When propaganda, interviews, and staged kisses stop working, does a system built on control always end up at direct psychological violence? If you can't sell the love story anymore, do you just torture it until it fits? Or, and this is the question the Capitol never plans for, what happens if even hijacked love starts to glitch? Other games, other couples. How often did this trick work? So if hijacked love can glitch, that means something else had to come first. Patterns, tropes, stories the Capitol audience already knew how to watch. Because when Peter calls them star-crossed lovers from District 12, that phrase doesn't come out of nowhere. At face value, it sounds poetic. But star-crossed lovers only works as branding if your viewers already recognize the trope, if the games and Capitol media have been seeding that exact storyline for years. Here's the real question. How many smaller, messier prototypes did we never see? Imagine earlier arenas before Katniss, when a pair from the same district formed a tight alliance. Maybe they shared food, maybe they held hands on the roof the night before. The producers zoom in. Caesar teases them in the interviews. Suddenly, it's young love in the arena, even if both tributes are mostly thinking about water sources and weapon ranges. Then, right on schedule, one of them dies in a way that makes for a perfect reaction shot. The cameras linger, the anthem swells, tragedy sells, and the Capitol learns the relationship is content. There is a lot to uncover here when you remember the rule change in the 74th games isn't innovation, it's escalation. Seneca doesn't invent romance. He just raises the stakes on a pattern the audience already craves. Before that, the promise was simpler. Flirtation equals screen time equals sponsors equal maybe one more day alive. You can almost see the breadcrumb trail of showmances that never got a second victor, only a better death scene. This is where we talk about Finnick and Annie. Their relationship is real, rooted in trauma and shared survival, not in a producer's storyboard. But once the Capitol notices how Finnick softens around her, they can't resist. Suddenly, the most weaponized victor in Panem also has a tragic fiancé. He's not just a killer, he's a lover who might lose everything. That part matters because the Capitol repackages Annie as his vulnerability, then later uses her as leverage, turning their genuine bond into both humanizing PR and a pressure point to control him. And if that's what they do to a straight couple that fits the fairy tale mold, what happens to relationships that don't? In a regime obsessed with image, you don't need a law on screen to erase queer love. You just edit it. Two boys from the same district hold each other on the first night. You frame it as brotherly support. Two girls who never leave each other's side. District partners. Any kiss that doesn't play well with Capitol norms gets cut for time, or worse, rerun with commentary that turns romance into deviance into villainy. Pattern interrupt. What if the most radical thing isn't that Katniss and Peter kiss, but that the kiss refuses to stay only a kiss, because their story doesn't stand out as the first manufactured romance? It stands out as the first that mutates. The Capitol pushes star-crossed lovers to distract from rebellion, and the districts start watching that same narrative as proof the rules can bend. The berries, the dual victory, the tours, Each moment the capital frames as a grand love gesture doubles as a crack in the system. The relationship the capital thinks it owns becomes a symbol it can't fully control. And once one love story slips the script, you have to wonder how many other buried narratives were always waiting to flip. Inside the control room, how producers script emotion beat by beat. So if one love story can slip the script, you have to ask, where was the script actually written? This is where we talk about the control room. Picture Seneca Crane surrounded by a wall of screens. Every district, every tribute, every breath. At face value, the games look chaotic. Forest, fire, blood. But in that room, it's a live edit bay. They're deciding in real time whether the capital sees a throat being slit or Peter brushing snow from Katniss's hair, cut from violence to tenderness. Zoom in on shaking hands, hold on a kiss for one extra beat. That part matters because emotion is the product. Here's the real question. When do they decide this isn't just a survival story, but a romance they can sell? You can almost hear the meeting. A game maker pulls up a reel. Peter's interview confession. Katniss in the chariot. The reaping hand raise. The audience loves the lovers, someone says. So how do we get them together? And how do we keep them apart just long enough to build tension? We're going to cover how those choices become actual arena events. The famous rule change, that's not mercy, that's a story beat. The lovers from the same district can both win now. Suddenly every viewer in the capital has permission to hope. Then, when they're too safe, tension drops. So you announce a feast. One backpack per tribute. Medicine for Peter in Katniss's. Instant dilemma, instant cliffhanger. You're not just moving tributes on a map, you're moving feelings on a graph. Think about the cave scenes. The cameras don't have to linger there, they choose to. They flood the area with soft rain, keep other threats at bay, maybe even dial down mutt activity nearby. Why? Because the ratings spike every time Katniss kisses Peter. Sponsors send soup, burn cream, medicine. The capital chatters, bets swing, and the control room sees it all updating on their dashboards. This is where we talk about feedback loops. Every betting spike when Katniss risks her life for Peter tells Seneca the relationship is working. Every surge in sponsor spending on romantic gifts proves that affection equals profit. You can imagine social chatter feeds scrolling beside the arena map, trending phrases, reaction metrics, Caesar Flickerman's segments clipped and replayed. If a defiant gesture from Katniss starts to trend as rebellion instead of romance, cut away, reframe, push a softer moment. Love becomes a fire blanket over political sparks. In this system, love isn't private. It's a variable on a dashboard. Too low, and the games feel hopeless. Too high, and you risk the victors believing in that promise themselves. So the control room dials it up with rule changes, then dials it back with mutts and near deaths, always chasing the perfect curve of fear, hope, and heartbreak. And once you see that curve, you have to wonder, what happens when the variables start refusing to cooperate? When the audience ships rebellion, the capital loses the plot. When the variables stop cooperating, something very 21st century happens inside this brutal ancient ritual. The audience starts to ship it. If you've ever been in a fandom, you know how this works. Once people decide a relationship is their relationship, the rules of the story become negotiable. You don't just want the couple to kiss, you want them to win against fate, against the writers, against the entire system that keeps throwing obstacles in their way. At face value, you're watching a romance. Underneath, you're drafting a rebellion with better lighting. Here's the real question. What happens when the Capitol accidentally turns its own murder show into that kind of fandom? From the moment Peter confesses on Caesar's stage, viewers aren't just told there's a love story, they're invited to participate. Sponsorships become a voting system. Kisses equal parachutes. The star-crossed lovers from District 12 inches stop being a twist in the games and start becoming a promise the audience feels the Capitol now owes them. And once there's a promise, there's outrage when it's broken. We're going to cover the quarter quell because that's where you really see the shift. The second book and film show Capitol streets full of people who adored the engagement tour. They bought the wedding dress, they cried at the baby lie. These are not people who are supposed to care whether a district girl makes it to her happily ever after. Yet when Snow uses that engagement as the excuse to throw Katniss and Peter back into the arena, the reaction isn't satisfied bloodlust. It's disbelief. You see it in the way Caesar has to sell the twist harder, in the way victors' families and Capitol citizens look stunned rather than thrilled. That part matters because it proves the love story has created real loyalty. People weren't just rooting for drama inside the rules of the games, they were rooting for Katniss and Peter to beat the rules. The Capitol wrote a romance, and the audience heard a contract. This is where we talk about humanization as a design flaw. By zooming in on Katniss tending Peter's wound, by replaying the cave scenes, by turning their relationship into a serialized cliffhanger, the broadcast stops treating them as faceless district tokens and starts treating them as people. Once you see them as people, their suffering starts to feel wrong, not entertaining. There is a lot to uncover here, but the core is simple. Punishment only works as spectacle when you can keep empathy low. The Capitol fails at that. By the time the quell is announced, the crowd doesn't want another tragic ending. They want the couple who earned their hope to cash it in, and that's the moment the Capitol quietly loses the plot. The audience is no longer satisfied with a beautiful tragedy. They're waiting for a payoff the system can't safely deliver. So what do you do when your own viewers start demanding a happy ending the games were never built to allow? Real or not real? Untangling love after propaganda. So what happens when the audience demands a fairy tale ending from a story that was built to kill its leads? This is where we talk about that little game Peter invents in the ashes of all that propaganda. Real or not real? On the surface, it's a coping mechanism for hijacking. But here's the real question. How do you rebuild a relationship when the Capitol has already rewritten your memories of it for ratings? Peter keeps throwing out fragments. The bread in the rain, the cave kisses, the wedding dress turned into a mockingjay. Real or not real, you watch Katniss do something very quiet and very radical. She answers, carefully. Sometimes with a simple real. Sometimes with context the cameras never caught. The night on the train when they couldn't sleep. The hours in Victor's village working on the plant book. The way he always takes the couch so her nightmares can have the bed. There is a lot to uncover here, because both of them are basically doing forensic work on their own love story. The arena footage is the public record, edited, scored, replayed across every district. But the real archive lives in things the games never aired. Haymitch passed out in his decayed Victor's Village kitchen. Katniss hiding in an empty house when the fence goes live. Shared jokes about Effie's schedules. None of that was sponsor-friendly, so it never existed for the Capitol. Real or not real becomes their way of saying, we get to decide what counts. At face value, you could say the whole relationship started as a strategy. Peter's on-air confession, the star-crossed lovers angle, the rule change that suddenly makes 2 victors from 1 district possible. But that part matters because strategy doesn't automatically cancel authenticity. If you pretend to care about someone to survive, and then keep choosing them when no one's watching, when the cameras are gone, when there's no more food parcels on the line, what do we call that? This is where the games haunt every tender moment. Their first kiss is worth medicine. Their hand-holding is worth sponsors. Even their marriage is, at one point, a condition for keeping their families alive. So when Peter asks, "You love me, real or not real," he isn't only asking about feelings, he's asking whether any emotion that passed through the Capitol's machinery can escape being a product. And the story refuses to give you a neat rom-com answer. Their love is messy, damaged, triggered by trauma and interrupted by flashbacks. It's inseparable from the violence that shaped it. They have children, but even that ending is haunted. Katniss admits she only agrees after years of Peter patiently asking, and the games still play out in her head when she watches her kids on the meadow. So why doesn't Collins just stamp real on the last page and call it a day? Because forcing a clean label would repeat the Capitol's mistake. The whole system runs on binaries, victor or dead, loyal or traitor, real or fake. The point of real or not real is that the answer keeps shifting as they heal, remember, and choose each other again. Their love isn't pure of propaganda. It's what survives after propaganda, which is a very different promise, and a much harder one to sell on TV. The Capitol's biggest miscalculation, teaching Panem to believe in love. And that's exactly where the Capitol slips. Because once you admit something survives after propaganda, you've admitted something the Capitol never wants anyone in any district to believe. The system is not everything. At face value, the star-crossed lovers plan is genius. You take a brutal death match, wrap it in a romance, and suddenly the games feel softer. You're not watching children die. You're watching a relationship unfold under pressure. The Capitol's goal is simple. Humanize the games just enough that people keep watching, and channel all that dangerous hunger for change into a safe fantasy. Don't dream of revolution. Dream of being the one person your victor chooses. But here's the real question. What happens when people start taking that story seriously on their own terms, instead of the Capitol's? There is a lot to uncover here, because the exact same tools they use to sell the romance are the ones that make the audience furious when the system hurts Katniss and Peter again. Caesar's interviews, the close-up cameras, the sponsorship gifts for every kiss, those are designed to make you care. Once you care, every new cruelty stops feeling entertaining and starts feeling personal. Think about the rule changes. Seneca Crane announces that 2 tributes from the same district can win. It's framed as mercy, as a reward for this touching love story. Then, at the end, he yanks it back. 1 victor only. That part matters because it teaches every viewer in Panem 2 things at once. The rules can bend for a narrative, and the capital will still use those rules to break your heart on command. You can feel why that would turn passive viewers into angry witnesses. And this is where we talk about power. The games are supposed to feel divine, immovable, almost mythic. Snow wants the rules to read as natural law. 2 tributes, 1 victor. The end. By changing them for ratings, the capital accidentally reveals the truth. The system is negotiable. If you can make an exception for love once, why not again? If you can have 2 victors from 12, why not no games at all? That's exactly how Katniss and Peter slide from romance into symbol. The Nightlock berries aren't just a cute relationship beat, they're a public refusal to play by the capital's script. Choosing each other over a clean, satisfying ending is the moment the star-crossed lovers stop being a distraction and start becoming a myth. The Mockingjay isn't just a bird anymore. It's the idea that love, loyalty, and stubborn human attachment can rewrite the rules of the arena. By the time we reach Mockingjay, the districts aren't just rooting for a couple. They're rooting for the promise buried inside that couple's story, that the capital's narrative can be hijacked. The irony is brutal. Snow wanted a love story he could control. What he created instead was a story powerful enough that once people believed in it, they didn't need the capital to tell them what it meant. And once a story stops belonging to the storyteller, that's when regimes start to crack. What this says about us, why we keep falling for manufactured love, and once a story stops belonging to the storyteller, that's when regimes start to crack. So here's the uncomfortable turn. If Panem's capital lost control the moment people fell in love with Katniss and Peter on their own terms, what does that say about us sitting on our couches, falling for whatever star-crossed relationship lands on our homepage next? Because the mechanics, they're not fantasy, they're familiar. You watch a reality dating show where 2 strangers are locked in a villa, a mansion, an island. Cameras everywhere. Confessionals. Strategic editing. At face value, it's spontaneous romance. But here's the real question. Who's Seneca Crane in that scenario? Who's changing the rules mid-season to push a ship the audience is already obsessed with? We're going to cover the distance between Panem and our world, and it's way shorter than it feels. Think about PR couples announced right before a movie premiere, algorithm-boosted ships on social media, those candid paparazzi photos that always happen to drop the weakest single releases. There is a lot to uncover here, because the reason these relationships dominate your feed isn't random. Someone in a metaphorical control room decided this is the love story that sells. How many times have you rooted for a couple based on a 3-minute montage, an interview clip, or a carefully lit photo shoot? How often do you feel you know their relationship when everything you've seen has passed through an editor, a publicist, a producer, and then an algorithm? That part matters because once you forget there's a filter, you start treating the edited version as truth. And emotionally, it works. Of course it does. The capital audience isn't cheering for Katniss and Peter because they're cruel. They're cheering because the promise of 2 kids from the same district beating the games together gives them hope and catharsis. You do the same thing when a reality show couple overcomes drama in the finale, or when a celebrity pair survives a scandal. You're not just watching romance, you're borrowing their survival as proof that connection is still possible in a brutal world. But this is where we talk about risk. When powerful institutions control which love stories get the spotlight, They're quietly deciding whose humanity gets center stage. If the only couples boosted are thin, rich, photogenic from certain backgrounds or districts, then everyone else's relationships become background noise. Their suffering, their breakups, their real-world stakes. Easy to crop out of frame. So where does that leave fandom? Do you have to stop shipping everything, stop enjoying the narrative to be ethical? Not at all. Loving the ship and interrogating the system that sells it to you don't have to be opposites. In fact, Katniss and Peter's entire relationship is a challenge to do both. Feel the romance and keep asking, who benefits from me feeling this way? The real question is what happens when a fandom starts answering that honestly. When viewers stop just crying over the love story and start noticing what the cameras never show, because once you see what's outside the frame, another pattern in the Capitol's storytelling snaps into focus. And it's even darker than the romance. Closing the loop, the love story the Capitol wrote and lost. So go back to that cave. At face value, it's simple. A girl, a boy, a locket, a pearl. You're supposed to swoon, forget the blood on the floor, and believe the games have paused for a kiss. But here's the real question. Was that cave a hiding place for two scared tributes, or a soundstage the Capitol built out of cameras, sponsors, and rules? There is a lot to uncover here when you look at that scene again. The pearl in Katniss's hand is a prop and a problem. It's the physical proof of the storyline the Capitol pushed. Peter as the devoted lover, Katniss as the girl torn between duty and desire. But it's also something they didn't fully own. That pearl survives hijacking. It survives snow. It survives the arena. The Capitol can frame it on screen, but they can't reach into Katniss's memory and edit what it ends up meaning to her. Because from the very start, the relationship isn't just happening, it's being produced. Caesar Flickerman's interview stage is where we're going to cover the pilot episode of their romance. Peter's confession brands them as star-crossed lovers before they've even stepped off the platform. Stylists drape them in coordinated fire, producers cut reaction shots, and suddenly every district has a ship the Capitol can sell back to them as hope. Then the arena machinery kicks in. Editing turns hours of terror into a highlight reel of almost kisses and shared soup. Sponsorships become a voting system where wealthy viewers decide that affection equals medicine, bread, and broth. Even the infamous rule change, two victors from the same district, functions as a mid-season rewrite to lock in the couple plot. That part matters because it proves the Capitol isn't just reporting a love story. It's adjusting the rules of life and death to guarantee one. Snow's philosophy sits under all of this. A little hope, carefully managed. A romance is the perfect delivery system, soft enough to distract, strong enough to keep people watching. And when Peter is hijacked, you see the final tool. They don't just script his lines, they chemically rewrite his feelings, turning the love story into a weapon aimed back at Katniss. So where does that leave the thesis? The star-crossed lovers narrative absolutely begins as a Capitol product. It's engineered through interviews, styling, editing, sponsorships, rule tweaks, Snow's speeches, and hijacking sessions. But it doesn't stay theirs. The districts start painting mockingjays, not roses. People in the Seam and in 11 whisper about Katniss and Peter as proof that the Capitol's story can be bent, misread, turned into something else. This is where we talk about the dual truth. The love is manufactured and real. It's propaganda and genuine connection. Katniss uses kisses to earn parachutes. She also reaches for Peter when no one is watching. That tension, strategy rubbing against sincerity, is exactly why the story hits so hard and spreads so fast. So did the Capitol manufacture the romance? Yes, and in doing so, it accidentally built the emotional engine of its own downfall. It taught a nation to care about two tributes, then acted shocked when that care refused to shut off on command. The real twist is what happens after the cameras move on from the cave. When the show ends, but the relationship and the rebellion it fuels doesn't. And to see that, we have to step outside the arena entirely and look at what the Capitol does next. Your turn in the arena. Join the victor's village. So this is where we talk about you. You've watched Katniss and Peter get dragged from a burnt bread memory to a nationwide obsession. You've seen the cave, the kisses, the trauma, the hijacking. But here's the real question. When you look at their relationship now, what do you actually see? Mostly real? Mostly strategic? Or so permanently tangled, the games never really let them find out? At face value, it's a simple ship question, but that part matters because the answer usually changes depending on whether you met them in the books or the movies. Did you grow up with Katniss's internal monologue where she's dissecting every gesture, every reason Peter might be performing for the cameras? Or did you first see it through the films where the Capitol's edits become your edits and the love story feels cleaner, softer, more inevitable? Tell me where you land. When Peter throws her the bread, is that the beginning of a real relationship? Or the first move in a story the Capitol later weaponizes when he confesses on Caesar's stage? Did you read that as pure, or as a calculated play from a boy who understands how the games work better than she does? And after the hijacking, do you think they ever escape the script Snow shoved them into? Or do they just rewrite it together? There is a lot to uncover here. And it's not just about Katniss and Peter. I want to hear the lore you've been quietly carrying. Which other tributes do you think were almost love stories the cameras never focused on? Was there a pair from District 6 who made a pact we only glimpse in a single line? Do you imagine a mentor in District 2 who once played the tragic romance angle before it was branded as star-crossed lovers, and then got buried when it stopped being useful? If you have headcanons about victors who were pushed into fake relationships for post-games tours, or a theory that Finnick's entire public persona was originally modeled on some forgotten Capitol favorite, drop them in. This channel's Victor's Village runs on your district gossip. And if you want to move in permanently, this is your invitation. Think of hitting subscribe as getting your own slightly creepy empty mansion at the edge of the district. We're going to cover mentors who turn into handlers, Snow's full propaganda machine, the post-war politics that reshaped the village, and why Finnick and Annie's tragedy is both a real love story and a PR nightmare the Capitol never fully controlled. Pattern interrupt for you. The Victor's Village itself? We're going to argue it's not a neighborhood. It's a set. A permanent soundstage built to sell the promise of hope. In the next episodes, we'll walk through how every phone line, every too big bed, is part of that design. So, welcome to the arena outside the arena. Pick a house, tell us your theory, and let's keep pulling apart the Capitol's tricks together. One last question. Real or not real for you? So here's where we turn the camera back on you. Peter's in that bed in District 12, asking real or not real about his own memories. You're on your couch, asking the same thing about his relationship, about every relationship the screen tells you to care about. Because at face value, it's simple. Katniss and Peter are the star-crossed lovers. She falls for the bread boy, he dies for her. They kiss under the hail of silver parachutes. Roll credits. But here's the real question. When you decide that story is real, who taught you to decide that way? There is a lot to uncover here, and it doesn't stay in Panem. When you binge a dating show, when a celebrity couple accidentally goes public, when a political power pair gets a glossy profile, what are you actually watching? A relationship, or an edit, a pitch, a product built by someone who understands that your attention is the most valuable resource in any district? This is where we talk about that tiny practical rebellion you can actually use. Next time you feel yourself getting invested in a romance, fictional or real, pause for 1 second and ask, who benefits from me caring about this? Does a network need a messy breakup to spike ratings? Does a government need a soft-focused love story to distract you from the games it's running somewhere else? That part matters because the reason a story exists will always shape the way it's told. And no, the solution is not to stop loving stories. Katniss and Peter prove the opposite. The problem isn't that we cry when they hold hands on the train or when he throws her that burnt bread. The problem is when we accept the Capitol's packaging of their relationship as the only version that counts. When we forget that a system chose the camera angles, the rule changes, the kisses it rewarded with medicine and bread and tiny silver parachutes. For Katniss and Peter, the journey isn't about proving to us that their love is real. It's about ripping their narrative away from a regime that tried to own it. From Caesar's interviews to Snow's threats, every moment pushes them to perform a promise they never agreed to. Their rebellion is not just in the berries. It's in deciding who they are to each other when no one is watching. So where does that leave you? Outside the arena, but still surrounded by screens. In any world, Panem or ours, choosing which stories to believe and why might be the most rebellious act you have. What happens if you start treating every on-screen romance, every Capitol-approved couple, every perfect Instagram relationship as a potential games broadcast? What changes when you start asking, every time, real or not real, and for whom? And if you pull that thread all the way, past the love stories, past the victors, past the villages, what else about the Capitol's world starts to come undone?